Welcome to this explainer. If you happen to vote in the American South, well, your congressional district might just be changing again. Today, we are breaking down the complex legal and demographic shifts that are basically triggering a massive wave of mid-decade redistricting across the entire region. Let's just dive right into it.
Here's our roadmap for today. First, the 2026 House firewall, then the Supreme Court catalyst, redrawing the South, the demographic math, and finally, a new era of maps.
Section 1. The 2026 House Firewall and the National Stakes.
To really understand why states are suddenly rushing to redraw electoral maps right in the middle of a decade, we actually have to zoom out and look at the highly volatile national political environment. Right now, the Republican Party is defending a razor-thin 217 to 214 majority in the House of Representatives. That leaves literally zero room for error. When you're facing headwinds like economic frustration and really stagnant presidential approval polling, well, the party in power desperately needs a strategy to protect that extremely narrow lead.
So, to offset potential double-digit losses in competitive northern and western suburban districts, southern states are mathematically optimizing their maps. Take a look at these projected gains. By tweaking boundaries under unified state government control, they're looking to manufacture about 18 to 19 new, heavily insulated seats. We're talking Florida netting 4, Texas 5, Alabama and Louisiana picking up 1 or 2 each, and Ohio adding 2.
This strategy creates what political analysts are calling a structural firewall. Think of it like a giant geographic buffer. It's designed to lock in that House majority absolutely, regardless of how voters swing nationally. By drawing these deeply safe seats, the battle for control is essentially insulated from the volatile national mood. But to actually build this firewall mid-decade, state lawmakers needed a legal green light.
Section 2, the Supreme Court catalyst, Callais v. Landry.
And that legal green light, it arrived on April 29, 2026, in a landmark 6-3 Supreme Court decision that actually started as a dispute over Louisiana's congressional maps. For 40 years under the old framework, plaintiffs pretty much just had to prove a map had discriminatory effects or results on minority voting strength. But post-Callais, the standard completely flipped. Now challengers must prove intentional discrimination. And crucially, the court recognized that drawing maps for purely partisan advantage is a perfectly legitimate, race-neutral objective.
Writing for the conservative majority, Justice Samuel Alito asserted that the Voting Rights Act does not require the creation of majority-minority districts unless there is a, quote, strong inference of intentional racial discrimination. And because pursuing partisan advantage is now considered race-neutral, it essentially provides a legal safe harbor for states to redraw maps for political gain, even if it ultimately results in the dilution of minority voting power.
Conversely, writing for the dissent, liberal Justice Elena Kagan offered a starkly different view of all this. She argued this new intent-based paradigm effectively, quote, renders Section 2 all but a dead letter. From her perspective, this decision strips away federal oversight and removes the primary tool historically used by voting rights advocates to combat the dilution of minority political power.
Section 3. Redrawing the South and the immediate fallout.
So with federal oversight severely restricted by the Callais decision, state legislatures capitalized immediately to dismantle specific congressional districts. I mean, the pace here is just blistering. Look at this timeline. On April 29th, the decision dropped and Florida enacted a new map that exact same day. The very next day, Alabama filed emergency motions. By May 1st, Louisiana took the truly unprecedented step of suspending a primary election just to give the legislature time to redraw maps. Within a single week, special sessions just swept across the South.
Let's zoom in on Alabama for a second to see what this looks like in practice. Following a 2023 court order, Alabama's District 2 had a black voting age population of nearly 49%, making it a very competitive, Democratic-leaning seat. But, utilizing the Callais ruling, the state filed emergency motions to revert back to an older map. Notice the massive drop here. The black voting population falls to under 40%. This essentially transforms it into a safe Republican seat and eliminates that Democratic advantage just weeks before the primary.
Over in Tennessee, similar moves are underway. The state called a special session aimed at dividing Memphis's 9th district, which is the state's sole remaining Democratic seat, and spreading its urban core out into the surrounding rural conservative areas. Representative Steve Cohen, who currently holds that seat, fiercely condemned the effort. He called it a mockery of democracy that dilutes the black vote in Tennessee to the absolute point of irrelevance.
Meanwhile, looking at it from the conservative perspective, former President Trump and state Republicans strongly supported the Tennessee redraw.
Trump publicly urged Tennessee leadership to, quote, correct the unconstitutional flaw in their current maps. The stated goal here is to remove what they view as mandated racial gerrymandering, aiming instead for a total 9-0 Republican sweep of the state's congressional delegation.
However, this strategy definitely carries some mathematical risks. To absorb heavy urban centers like Nashville and Memphis into surrounding rural areas, a tactic commonly known as cracking, well, mapmakers are forced to spread Republican voters much thinner. So while the big goal is a 9-0 sweep, look at the proposed win margins. The Republican advantage in Districts 5 and 9 is actually reduced to under 12 percentage points.
Section 4. The demographic math and the 2025 to 2026 census data context.
Now, beyond the courtroom battles and all the political rhetoric, there's some undeniable data-driven math fueling these specific mapping strategies, shifting American demographics. The Census Bureau's 2025 data reveal the slowest U.S. population growth since the height of the pandemic. As you can see on this chart, this stagnation is primarily driven by a massive, historic 50% drop in net international migration, which fell to just 1.3 million.
So what does this all mean for your district's map? Well, this decline in international migration disproportionately impacts major urban centers like Memphis, Nashville, and Birmingham, creating population deficits. Because these cities are losing population density relative to other areas, state mapmakers now have a perfectly neutral mathematical justification for their actions. See, federal law requires districts to have equal populations. To meet that mandate, they argue they literally have to expand city districts outward into conservative suburbs and rural areas. And naturally, that dilutes those concentrated voting blocks.
Section 5. A new era of maps and the end of the 10-year cycle.
Traditionally, redistricting happens just once a decade. It's like a giant puzzle we solve every 10 years. But by preempting these demographic shifts through mid-decade redistricting, political operatives are fundamentally changing the timeline of American representation. And analysts are warning that this is really just the beginning. States like South Carolina, Mississippi, and Georgia are already preparing for a wave of permanent redistricting leading into the 2028 and 2030 cycles, specifically targeting districts to maximize majorities and ensure compliance with this new Callais standard.
As we wrap up this explainer, this fast-moving structural shift leaves us with a pretty profound question. In the post-Callais era, has the will of the voters been permanently subordinated to the mathematical optimization of partisan maps? Going forward, will the battle for Congress be permanently fought in the courts and state houses rather than at the ballot box? It is a fascinating new reality that we all absolutely need to watch closely. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.
An investment in knowledge pays the best interest, so why not invest in this channel? Click like and subscribe for more.